Excellent. So tell me more about that experience as you were exploring group for the first time, group therapy. What were some of your apprehensions? What were some of your barriers? Any issues with access to care? How did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah. Um, Mostly anxiety and the thought of sharing some of my very vulnerable things that I started to share with this therapist felt like they weren't the kind of things that I had ever spoken about with friends or even family because they felt so deep and vulnerable. So that just felt very scary.
Are you thinking about taking the leap into group therapy, wondering if group therapy is even effective? Well, you're not alone. That can be a scary step even for the seasoned therapy client. So stick around because in this episode of the Mental Health Toolbox, we're taking a deep dive into the topic of group therapy with seasoned group therapist Tanya Cole-Lesnick. So let's go. Tanya Cole-Lesnick has been a psychotherapist and coach since 1995. She is a licensed clinical social worker. She received her master's degree in social work from New York University after group therapy changed her life. She has extensive experience in outpatient hospital mental health, private practice, and wellness center settings. From those experiences over the years, she has identified her most important focus: helping people live lives that light them up. She does this by helping clients to access and honor their truth, to change habits that don't serve them, and to heal faulty narratives so that they are living in alignment inside and out. Her work revolves around intimate groups as the sharing of inner worlds and being human together in a safe space, and is what she finds to be the most powerful way for lives to transform. So let's go. Hello, Tanya, and thank you so much for making time to be on the Mental Health Toolbox today. It's an honor and privilege to have you here, and excited to hear all about your wisdom and what you're going to share with our audience today.
Yeah, hi Patrick. It's so great for me as well to be here. And actually, I say that a lot too, an honor and a privilege. I agree.
Yes, it really is. And I try not to take anything for granted. Just being able to have these resources available and be able to talk to someone who's in New York and I'm in California and be able to have this kind of face to face pseudo interaction is pretty fantastic in real time. And the world we live in, especially when it comes to mental health, being able to spread awareness in a way that we really never have been able to before, right? A lot of the information we share, that you share, has been more or less kind of confined to four walls in a therapy office or a group setting, and that's not the case anymore. We get
Yeah. I'm so grateful to people like you who are doing shows like this because I think to have that conversation become more and more the norm in our culture is very healing.
absolutely invalidating and educational for me. It's kind of selfish. The reason I do this is my passion to raise mental health awareness, but I get to learn too from experts like you about things that maybe I'm not so savvy in, or haven't had time to deep dive into. So it's a great kind of continuing education for me as well as a therapist. So that's my internal motivation as well. So excellent.
Love it.
So I know a little bit about you, but I would like you to maybe start by sharing off our session here, where you come from, what you do, what you're passionate about, and who is Tanya.
Yeah. Okay. I first went to therapy when I was struggling. I was in my 20s and I was struggling to have a long term love relationship. And I really didn't understand what was going on. And for a while, didn't even think of therapy as a valid choice. I thought therapy was for people with more legit problems. And I felt a lot of stigma connected to the idea of therapy. But at some point, I did decide I would explore therapy and felt very immediately connected and cared for by the therapist that I started to work with. And she added, as her recommendation, group therapy to what she thought would be helpful for me. And she both did individual work and group work. And the idea of it terrified me, but I trusted her and I was sort of intrigued. So I decided to go ahead and do it. And it was a lot of things, and we can certainly talk about any layers that would be helpful to explore. But ultimately, what it helped me do was yes, I did kind of connect to what was in the way in terms of my sense of self worth and things that were probably interfering with my ability to connect to a long term love partner. And P.S. I did meet my husband around that time, and we've been married almost 30 years.
Wow,
But what,
congratulations.
thank you. But what it also did was help me connect to myself. I went into that experience feeling very flawed, and it helped me realize that I wasn't flawed, I was human. And of course, we all have things that are challenging for us and different narratives that we grow up with, and all of that. And so, having that experience and learning about what my needs are, learning about all the different layers of what made up or what make up who I am was a huge part of that experience. And it was so meaningful. I was a graphic designer at the time, and I
Mm.
decided to switch careers. And I went back to school. I got my licensed clinical. So I became a licensed clinical social worker and have been working in that field ever since 95. And really doing a lot of amazing work with wonderful people, continuing to find group being a very powerful and helpful way for growth and for people to really know they're not alone and connect with each other from the inside out. It's been an amazing experience.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've studied group theory in graduate school. It was Yalom, right? All in the same boat. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he was the big one.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean there were a few others, but he was
Right,
really
right.
the guy.
Yes, yes. There is definitely something magical about group therapy, and I have led my share of groups, be it for PTSD, substance abuse, borderline personality disorder, cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's something I've definitely missed since the pandemic. Is not having those face-to-face groups. There's online, but people are a little seems more hesitant to jump into an online group. It certainly doesn't have the same energy. Um, so that's pretty fascinating. So you leveraged group, as scary as it was, in your 20s. You were a graphic designer by trade, and there was a definite why behind it. I think anytime we do something uncomfortable, we need a big enough why to walk over hot coals, right? To get to the other side. And for you, it was a lot of this imposter syndrome, it sounded like, or a lot of internal dialogue and self doubt about getting into a secure, committed relationship and feeling prepared for that. And this offered you a sounding board, right? In order to process those feelings and concerns and thoughts and get validation and guidance. But then you didn't just leverage that for your personal life. Something happened where you then decided to become a therapist. Was it correlated at all? Did your experience in group lend to your desire for a career change?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that just connecting to myself in a more meaningful way kind of opened me up to a connection with myself that was so much more positive than I had ever experienced. And I think because that had such meaning for me, it felt like made sense to me to dedicate my life to doing something like that because it was so powerful. And it's almost like, in the Wizard of Oz, where you got the sort of black and white and then it goes into Technicolor. I mean, it's
Mhm.
almost like I had this experience of like, oh, the world opened up in this different
Yes.
way that felt so much more full. And
Mm.
it, it, it felt almost impossible not to keep going with that.
That's the goal, right? So when you feel inspired towards something, when it lights you up, is to
Yeah.
find a way to turn that into a career, right? If you're doing what you love, it's not a vocation, it's a vacation, right? As they say.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
excellent. So tell me more about that experience as you were exploring group for the first time, group therapy. What were some of your apprehensions? What were some of your barriers? Any issues with access to care? How did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah. Um, Mostly anxiety and the thought of sharing some of my very vulnerable things that I started to share with this therapist felt like they weren't the kind of things that I had ever spoken about with friends or even family because they felt so deep and vulnerable. So that just felt very scary. When I first went into group, the very first session, my therapist did not introduce me to the group, and that
Mm.
shocked me. Now I run group and I always introduce people,
Right.
but I did explore why that was the way she did it. Honestly, I don't even think I asked her about it, but I explored
Mm.
inside my own head and came to the conclusion that she must have been wanting me to develop my own voice. That was something that
Mm.
was a little bit, I was a little shy, I was sort of tentative. So to have to then figure out, all right, what do I do when I'm not being introduced? And I don't think she ever did actually introduce me. At the very end of that first session, she asked me why I was being so quiet. And then I
Mm.
did introduce myself to others, but I felt like they hadn't even noticed that I was there until I introduced myself. So definitely this tendency to withdraw.
Mm. Now, the therapist that ran this group, was that your personal or private therapist beforehand?
Yeah, she's the one that I
Okay.
went to
Right.
for the individual, and then she suggested I add group and ran the
Okay.
groups herself. So, and actually, that combination, it's not really answering your other question, but just a comment about that combination of somebody being able to see you in a group situation and be able to
Mhm.
process with you separately, individually, is part of what I think made that so powerful because there were definitely things that came up during group that I felt shut down about. Like I would find people intimidating. I would decide that they have things all together in a way that I don't. And then I would process some of this separately. And I remember my
Mm.
therapist saying things like, "Oh, you're falling for that, are you?" Like,
Mhm.
help me see that we all kind of have these representatives that show up for us and to not take that too much to heart and to know that um, there's usually more to it than that.
Wow, bravo. Yeah, the shared human experience, right? As opposed to thinking that somehow we're the only outlier, right?
Yeah.
With these things, these reflected appraisals, as we oftentimes say, the thought that we're being judged by others or that we don't measure up. Or yeah,
Mhm.
that's fantastic. I think that's a great way to segue into group. I know in my own experience leading groups, even working with clients for several years, some of them, multiple years, and then still having the conversation about group and watching them, tense up and drag their feet. And like, oh, maybe, not right now, maybe down the road. But
Yeah.
for the ones that did make that jump, you would see the growth, and most times occur exponentially toward those goals for a lot of the reasons you just said. That you knowing that client can really kind of even very subtly work with those known points of intervention about that person's particular makeup and their challenges. And because you have that unique insight, while respecting their privacy, finding ways to kind of lead them toward that discovery within group. And the great insight for you to identify that maybe that wasn't an oversight by the therapist when she didn't introduce you.
I'm
That
sure.
was very much an intervention in itself, right? Understanding again your personality. Had you been somebody more charismatic, maybe she would have just introduced you right away. But perhaps that was an opportunity for her to kind of tease you out on your own accord, right?
Yeah. 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 I
Yeah.
mean, just as you were saying, that opportunity as a therapist to see what our clients kind of bring into a group situation and be able to work with those things. An example that comes to my mind is just one with a person who might be a real caretaker in their lives and that they tend to caretake other people all over the place. So in a group situation, they might put their own needs on the back burner and offer feedback for their peers in group, that kind of thing. And so you also mentioned, respecting people's privacy. But people do start to share with each other what it is they're working on. So the more that people know, oh, this is something that I'm working on, the more we can call that out
Hmm.
without feeling like it's shaming somebody at all, but it's offering helpful feedback that we're all kind of wanting. And as long as we've given permission for that kind of thing, it can be just a really helpful thing. So that, anyway, that's an example of.
Yeah, excellent point. For anyone listening right now, I just want you to kind of stop for a second, come back to us and take some notes on that. Don't drift away because that's really important to understand that your role in a group setting is imperative, meaning you have a lot more control than you think you do about your recovery and the group process because everybody that participates in a group contributes to the energy and dynamic of that group. It is an opportunity because if you open a door to something that maybe you weren't very comfortable touching on, it gives the therapist and other people in the group permission to then expound on that, elicit, give more feedback. And you can always, if you get uncomfortable, right, you can always kind of close that again and trust the therapist, give the therapist some signals or, that you're not quite comfortable yet to go too deep in that subject and they can close it back up. That's part of the group process, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So, how long were you in counseling with your therapist before you made that jump? I'm curious.
That is a good question. How long? I'm thinking I went back to school in 93 and I started this part of the journey probably 90. So about 3 years. I think I did the group for about 2 years. I actually did it three different times of my life, 2 years a run each time. So
Hmm.
I did it for about 2 years or so and made the decision. And it probably took a number of months before I actually got into a program and started moving forward with that. So, yeah, probably between the second and third year was the process of moving towards which program I was going to be in. But before that, it was about 2 years.
Excellent. Were you aware that your counselor at the time had a group offering, or was that kind of did she pull it out of her sleeve when she thought it was appropriate?
She pulled it out of her sleeve when she thought it was appropriate. And always, and this actually happens to me as well, um, during the group settings, we would all tease her about pushing group because that's the way I think she did it with everybody. She'd have people
Hmm.
in her individual practice and she would encourage them to try group. I suppose some of the people may have come directly for group, but more often than not, she would be pushing group, encouraging people to do group. Similar to what I do, I often work with individuals who I know would get some benefit about out of adding group to the mix. So I would start to talk to them. And you actually voiced it a little earlier when you were talking about people's sort of hesitation or resistance
Hmm.
to group, because it does kick up a lot of fear for people. I think people don't think they're going to get the same kind of attention that they get in individual therapy, and they're
Hmm.
not have the opportunity to work on their own issues in the same way. And I think they think that hearing other people's issues is just kind of a necessary evil of group, but don't realize how much all of that helps with growth. And I think that's part of my inspiration to be guesting on podcasts. And I made a little documentary of my own story that
Wow.
tells this story of how I went to group and how it changed my life for this very reason. I think people don't understand that it brings something special and powerful to be able to go to group that is not available in individual.
That's fantastic. Now, is that documentary found on your website? Because I
Yes.
definitely don't want to drive by that. I want to come back
Yeah,
to that.
yeah. So the document is
Yeah.
only 10 minutes long. I think
Only 10 minutes. Okay. Let's just pause right there. Anybody that knows how much work it is to edit video or anything should know that 10 minutes is no small feat. Just throw that out there.
keep saying that. That is true. I mean, it was done for me. It was professional, but it took a long time and it was quite a process, but I think really beautifully done. So I feel really proud of it.
What an excellent way to create awareness is with your own story and packaging it. I mean, that's just an act of love when you
Mhm.
document your own story like that for other people who are, not just potential clients, but anyone who might be potentially in the same position that you were, is to understand that frame of mind and this your story. That's a big deal.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And I think it's also healing for myself because when I think back to how much stigma I felt at the beginning, when I first did it, when I first became a therapist, even, I did not reveal to even some of my closest friends that the reason why I made this decision to change my career is because I had this life changing experience in therapy. It was something only a few people got to hear about that in my life. And it really speaks to how much I think things have changed in our culture. So that's part of it. Although there's still some stigma that I know people experience for sure. I think it also speaks to the understanding that being vulnerable is kind of the glue that holds us all together. And
Hmm.
that the more I have in my own life taken risks of being vulnerable, the more I am modeling for clients and other people that, oh, this is okay. It feels okay to hear when somebody else is vulnerable. I think my fear in the past was always, can't be vulnerable, gotta show up again with that representative idea. And
Hmm.
I used to always think in terms of gotta button up and sort of present a certain way. And I think that's dangerous for us to, as people, to feel like that's the way for us to show up and connect to each other. I think that vulnerability
Yeah.
is important.
And that's a really murky water, right? Because in graduate school, we're taught, self disclosure, be very careful. You don't want to be that whole medical model, even is that, not to be too personal, right? Because then you won't be respected
Hmm.
if they see
Hmm.
how human you are, which we know is not true, right?
Yeah.
And I'm definitely seeing a shift with that, is more self-disclosure, more vulnerability, within boundaries, of course, but sharing our own struggles to some extent can be very validating, right?
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
clients, consumers.
Yeah. And that's such an interesting point that you're saying about the graduate school and education and professionally. What's sort of told to us is this idea of, yes, not showing certain parts, that part's sort of behind the scenes work. And I think for me, having grown up and being a good girl, and that was sort of
Hmm.
the way that I identified, it was a little damaging for some of what is more magical in terms of my ability to help people grow and connect with other people, is to allow some of that to live a little bit more freely. And I'm really working on it and nurturing it now, and in a way to honor humanness and just that fear of like, what's sharing too much, what's problematic as opposed to helpful for people. It's just an interesting question and I'm challenging it every day.
Yes, yes, definitely. It's a journey. I know. Is figuring out those nuances in
Hmm.
practice and what's beneficial. You touched on a really important objection that I just can't leave alone. And that is when it comes to groups, I hear that all the time. Whenever I bring it up with clients, is I can, I can barely manage what I have now. I really don't think I could tolerate listening to other people's trauma or other people's stuff. Right. Um, and you kind of touched on that and how it can actually be healing. Can you say a little bit more about that? in your experience?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one of the things that's so helpful about group is it helps us all touch on unconscious stuff. So when you're hearing somebody else's story, it may touch various things inside of you. It could be resistance. It could be like, I don't want to hear that.
Hmm.
Or it could be, you could be triggered in some way, or it could resonate so strongly that it's helping you connect to something you hadn't even been thinking about. And so that becomes part of the work. The way that I structure my groups is I have each person share a little bit about where they are on their current journeys. And that's something that we've already identified together in our group. What are you longing for? What do you want to work towards? That kind of thing. And then in real time, we kind of explore how's it going? Where are you going in this journey? And then I ask people to respond to each other. What's resonating as you hear your peers talking? What's resonating for you? And so the caretakers, like we talked about this a little bit earlier,
Hmm.
right? Somebody who might need to be working on their caretaking tendency might purely go towards that person and only offer that person feedback without paying attention to what's coming up for them. And so
Mm.
that becomes part of the work. But what is coming up for you? How do you not forget yourself, even though there's somebody here that you're responding to? And so that
Mm.
becomes part of the work. I think group is like a microcosm of life outside of work, outside of
Absolutely.
rather.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it
Wow.
gives them
Yes.
an opportunity to work on things in these sort of different layers and a different way and touching on it kind of in real time as stuff is unfolding. So it's pretty, yeah, I keep saying powerful, but it is, it's pretty powerful.
Yes. Takes quite the present mind in order to even catch those things in group in real time because there's so much going on.
Mhm.
To think that meta with someone and help them, dive deep when it, even in fact, when the conversation is being driven towards someone else to have to be able to pause and focus on that one individual's process is super powerful.
Yeah.
And kudos to you because that's a hard thing to do as a group leader is to really dive, level deeper with people in the process of group.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I let it kind of happen in various ways and different timing because somebody may not be ready to offer. They
Mm.
may not even know what's coming up for them yet, which is part of
Mhm.
why I love the separate processing. And not everybody does it, but it is something that's available to my clients. So to be able to think, oh, this thing came up and I felt myself being angry, and we could together explore, all right, but what do you think that anger is connecting to in your own life? Because really, it is for each person. You're not really there for the other people. I mean, you kind of are, but it's for your own work and the depth of your own work.
Mhm.
But there is celebration of each other. We do offer feedback to each other when we notice growth. But noticing growth in somebody else is so inspiring for us, and being able to recognize and see those tiny steps that somebody has made that we know because what we know about that person, those are actually huge steps, and we can call it out and celebrate it. And all of that helps us see that in ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we understand now that you have definitely benefited from group in your experience and it's really been a cornerstone of your personal development, right? Your understanding and to the point where now you are very passionate about groups yourself. You lead groups. I'm wondering if, in your experience, what were some of your own experiences that have now translated to your own practice? What did you learn in your experience with groups that have informed how you lead groups yourselves now? To particular strategies or nuances, um,
Well, I
model.
actually lead group in a way quite differently from the way the group was led when I first did it. Because I think the group that I did was a very group therapy model,
Mhm.
no leading really from the therapist, or very little. I mean, she used to intervene and say things when necessary, but as much as possible, let everybody else kind of do all the talking. My groups are much more structured than that. And I think it's just, I've done it for so many years. It was my own discovery of what I felt was helpful guidance for people. And even though I think the group that I attended was so powerful during the time that I attended it, I have tried to do more kind of an open kind of group format and let people find their own voice. And I haven't been great at that style of group. And I don't know whether it's just not a good fit for me or whether it's maybe less of a good fit in our current culture. I'm not sure. But I definitely structure, and there are certain things that I work with people on within the group structure. So I mentioned that I ask everybody to come in with what they're working on, and that gets re identified as many times as needed, really. People are
Mhm.
talking about what do they want, what are they longing for. So for somebody, it might be to reduce the angry lashing out, a pattern that's uncomfortable within somebody's life. That could be the goal. For somebody else, it might be feeling so depleted that they're not able to connect to some of the career aspirations that they have, that kind of thing. Or wanting to connect to community more, whatever it is, people are identifying that. They bring in their own stuff about whatever's going on, like I said earlier. But then I ask people to say what's resonating for them and to say if anything's triggering for them so that we're really touching on what happens when we hear from each other in that way. I also offer a topic. So we kind of split the group in half. It's kind of where you're at. And then I offer a topic related to being human. So, and these topics grow out of the sessions. So,
Mhm.
depending on whatever it is that we've been talking about in the session, I will create a topic that I send to everybody prior that they can give some thought to.
Mm.
So, for example, my current topic is what do people feel they need to be more intentional about versus work on letting go of, and to talk through how that shows up in their lives. We had that topic planned for this past group. My current groups are every other week. We had that topic planned for the past group, and we didn't get to it thoroughly enough, but people felt like it was a juicy, important topic that they all had a lot to say about. So we're bringing that one back. But that kind of thing, it's our group, it's our space, and we're always talking through and developing what's going to help our group do what everybody wants it to do. We've also created more of an accountability piece in our group, and that grew out of the members who are interested in being able to check in about accountability stuff. So people will say at the end of group something that they want to be intentional about, and we check in later on. So um, yeah, so that's pretty much how I structure that. And I guess that just came through a lot of trial and error and deciding what felt to be the most helpful and give people some space to connect to themselves and each other while also helping to lead it a little bit.
Wow, it definitely sounds like it stems from a lot of experience and wisdom. And I just really want to highlight how fantastic it is, at least in my opinion, whatever it's worth, that you are uh, giving ownership of the group to the members, right? In terms of what they want to discuss and even
Yeah,
bringing stuff back and giving freedom to extend topics. So, oh, we're done with that topic this week. And sorry, we already have this on the agenda.
right.
For the next one, I can cut them off. And oftentimes I think that that's a lot of the power in group is that's been in my experiences. I will oftentimes let the group decide what they want the next week's topic to be
Hmm.
and kind of give them some buy-in there. Plus, it helps ensure that what, at least in my experience, what the time that we're spending together is spent wisely
Yeah,
because I know it's important to them. I'm not just taking a wild guess.
right.
Um, and then something that you said that I had not heard of, but I've not practiced, which I thought was really cool, is giving them, a reminder or setting out the topic ahead of time to give them time to really get their thoughts together. Because how quickly do we, just 90 minutes? I don't know how long your groups are, but 90 minutes goes by so fast.
Yeah.
And between the time, check in and processing, and, by the time you get into the meat of it, it's almost time to close it back up. And it doesn't leave a whole lot of time for free thought, especially when you're sharing the conversation. So
Yeah.
that's a really fantastic fire tip right there, is giving the regular attendees, the people are going to attend, time to put their thoughts together before group.
Yeah. I think when you have that seed planted, some of whatever the topic is, it's going to show up in places you wouldn't necessarily notice otherwise. So, yeah, I think it gives people time to collect their thoughts. It gives them time to observe themselves and see where it shows up, even. So, it can be really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you definitely have a wealth of information around groups. Do you tend to gear your groups toward a particular population, or is it kind of a intentional mixed bag?
At the moment, all my groups are all women.
Mhm.
But the groups that I had done were men and women, and I know now gender is more fluid, or the way we speak about gender and understand gender is much more fluid than it used to be. And so I'm kind of open to evolving from that. I have not yet. I still, right now, am working with women. I often work with women, I would say 40s to 60s, but I
Mhm.
do have, well, 30s to 60s maybe. And occasionally I have younger women in their 20s who are kind of interested in group. I'm always a little bit worried they're going to feel like they're not with people their age group. And some people love actually being with people in a different age group and feel much more
Mhm.
comfortable with that. And other people maybe long to be with other people within their same age group. So that ends up being a conversation, and sometimes it works great, and sometimes it doesn't work as great. But yeah, so that's kind of, I guess it's kind of everybody in a way, but in terms of working with all kinds of women for now, I think there are definitely patterns, and maybe this just even comes out with my clients. I think I tend to have a lot of clients who have fallen into sort of good girl narratives and have
Mm.
perfectionistic tendencies, and get caught up in the idea of should, that kind of thing. So I don't know whether
Mhm.
it's just because those are the clients I mostly attract. So so many of them have that kind of um, healing that they're working on. There definitely
Yeah.
does seem to be a lot of that in my groups.
Well, there's that saying, your vibe attracts your tribe, right? So
Yeah.
it's fantastic. I mean, there's so many directions we could take this conversation, because group is such a deep, deep topic, when it comes to recovery and experience. What would you what would you like to share with our audience that you feel is most pertinent about the group process, be it your experience or advice?
I think it's really, besides all the good work that we've already been talking about, you can get from group, there's a connection between the group members that happens as they have these experiences together and allow each other in their worlds a little bit more. We really do root for each other and feel connected and happy to see each other and laugh a lot. So there's so much fun to it too. And I don't know that I always highlight that part of it enough because
Mhm.
I talk about all the good work that gets done, but it really is a lot of fun. I do groups now all virtually. I know you were talking
Mm.
about, like,
Mhm.
sometimes there's some resistance to that, or it doesn't feel the same. And for sure, not everybody likes the idea of doing virtual groups, but I do think there's something about face to face, like you literally are in a square with just your face. So there is
Mhm.
something very
Hmm.
intimate about
Good
that.
point.
Um, but when I used to do it in a physical office space, there was another therapist that worked next to me. And so every time that I ran the group, she would comment on how much laughing happened and that her clients would always hear the laughing. And she would make a comment like, "Oh, I bet you wish you were over there," or something like that, because she just heard all that energy coming from us. And I just remember back in the day when we did the in person group, there was a lot of lingering in the parking lot where people really were enjoying this conversation and connection so much that they really
Hmm.
wanted to keep going. And so it was a really lovely experience. And I've done actually, and I offer these retreats that grow out of some of the group work that people do. So it brings them to a different
Mm.
level of connection and depth, even because there's some trust that gets developed, of course, by these
Hmm.
relationships and sharing this kind of inner world. And I pride myself very much in creating a space that people feel safe enough to do that. That sharing our inner worlds, I don't take that lightly. Like, that is not something that's easy for people to do, especially if you're not in an environment where it feels safe to do that. And so that's so critical to me, that people really do feel safe when they do that. And when they take a certain leap of faith and do group, that's amazing. But then when they go into a face to face, in person retreat situation where we're spending a weekend together and going a little bit deeper because we have some more time to get into some of the stuff, it can be amazingly bonding and connecting. And that feeling that you're not alone is so helpful and healing.
Wow. So taking it a level deeper with the retreats and getting that human connection going. So, just a disclaimer, I spoke with limiting assumptions, having not run online groups myself as of yet. I've personally been dragging my feet a little bit because of my own concerns over maybe things not going smoothly with technology and everything. How have you as a therapist overcome those hurdles as far as making sure that everybody is on board, they have the right setup, technology, the platform? Have you had any problems with that?
I'm trying to remember. We started to do Zoom before the pandemic, and I did a few
Mhm.
virtual groups before the pandemic. Um, of course, not knowing what was ahead. And were there, I think that, yeah, once I did a group and the wrong link went out, and or people didn't get the link and it was hard for people to get on. And so that was a little bit tricky, but it's been rare that we've had issues. I think during the pandemic, it was hard for people to get full on privacy sometimes. And that
Mhm.
had to become a
Mhm.
conversation to remind people that that's critical. People have to, I mean, that's part of the feeling
Mhm.
safe situation.
Mhm.
So, to make sure that people can get a private space for themselves. Other than that, I feel like for the most part, it goes smoothly. Every now and then, somebody's connection's bad, and it's a bummer because then we might lose them for that session or something. Although I haven't really had it ever be worse than a momentary glitch here and there. But for the most part, it's gone pretty smoothly, and people certainly understand now much better how to work virtually than we once did. So
Yeah, amen to that. That's so true. Yeah, that's
yeah,
if there's anything the pandemic has done, it's definitely raised the bar for telehealth. That's
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So many words of wisdom about group and the group process and objections and the value of group. Um, what nuggets of wisdom in terms of accessing group or anyone that might be dragging their feet, whether you're speaking to potential consumers or therapists, what might be your words of wisdom that you'd really like people to take away from your experience?
Think there's all different ways of connecting to community and to find, and I'm calling it community, but right now, of course, we're talking about personal growth communities where people can connect to that. So if somebody's interested in working with me personally, I do have a free discovery session. So they could connect me, they can schedule that themselves on my website, and I know we'll get into that a little bit later. So that's one way if somebody's interested in working with me. I do know that there's a few other group online group offerings. I don't even know what you
Hmm.
call them. I think one is called Pace Groups. Another one is called Grouport, I think. And I don't really know how to speak to them directly, but just to say that there's more availability, I think, than there once was. I guess
Hmm.
certainly technology and having the virtual capacity has helped with all of that. I think there's also other ways to connect to communities, not by necessarily going into a group. So, another one that comes to mind is there's the holistic psychologist. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's got like millions of followers on Instagram. And the reason why I suggest her is she does this self healers something. It's an offering that she does, not all the time, but it gives you this community where you can connect to mental health ideas and communicate with other people. It's not live. It's not, as far as I know, um, you're not sort of live in a Zoom room, but you can
Hmm.
get the information. But there are other people in the community that you can communicate with. I feel like it's a good way to get your toe a little bit wet
Okay.
and see,
Okay. Like a
like,
stepping stone, right?
yeah, exactly. A stepping stone and a way to say, okay, there's people here who are also on a personal growth journey, and I really like the experience of connecting to them. And that might be just a little indication that perhaps opening up to more of a group experience would be something that would feel healing.
Well, I know we're landing the plane here, but I am curious since we're talking all about group and in your personal experience, and this is, I think, the experience with most of my clients is that there's usually an established relationship and individual therapy before they venture into groups, whether that be a group with the same therapist or another group. Do you feel like individual counseling should be the first step before jumping into a group, or do you think someone with no experience in counseling would still benefit from diving headfirst into a group setting?
I think because I'm actually in the process of putting together packages, and for that very reason, I do think that the individual work doesn't necessarily have to be individual work with the therapist that's running the group. So if you've done some individual work elsewhere, I think that is beneficial because you know sort of what you're even wanting to do in group. You know what you're bringing to group. You know what you're working on. I think that is very helpful, especially if you haven't done much healing yet, and if you're more easily triggered because there's some dysregulation issues because you haven't fully healed some of what you're just starting to look at. I think group can be a little bit triggering in that way
Hmm.
as people talk about some of their struggles if you're not yet comfortable with saying what your own story is. So I definitely feel like it's a good beginning to have a little bit of individual under your belt. Um, I, as I said before, I really like doing the individual and group together because I think that
Hmm.
shared experience can be so helpful for the individual work as well. So it
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
it goes back and forth, and the work kind of helps both sides of work help the other side. So,
Yes. So individual therapy leads to clarity
hmm
on goals,
hmm
insights,
hmm
and then they can take those to group to expound on, to
yeah,
get accountability for.
yeah, yeah.
Great advice. Yeah. Do you feel like somebody who's entering group should wait for the therapist to call that out on them if they ever do? Or do you
Hmm.
feel like they should lead with that in group as a way to kind of break the ice?
Wait, ask that again. I'm not sure.
So, in terms of somebody's insight into what their awareness is about their goals, what they want to work on, do you feel like if they're entering group for the first time, do you feel like they should wait on the group therapist to elicit that from them? Or do you feel like they should lead with that on their own to kind of break the ice?
A little bit of both. I mean, when somebody comes into my groups, I lead with that. That is sort of my natural beginning.
Hmm.
Where are you? What have your group experiences been? What do you want to be working on? That kind of thing. I get that out there from the beginning. if somebody's in a group and that's not I mean, there's so many different ways that people run groups. That's the thing.
Hmm.
In
I
some
know it's
groups,
hard to
it
say.
may not be the appropriate thing to just go right into your goals. But I think asking questions and trying to get a feel of what the group structure is really important part of being able to figure out how to make use of that group structure in a way that works for you. So whether or not you lead with that, I think asking the question about would it be an appropriate time for me to share my goals, that kind of thing, because it could totally be an oversight that the group leader just didn't go there
Hmm.
initially. But I think it's usually a good place to start. But if the group is structured in a different way, it may not be the most appropriate moment. So I think just to feel that out a little bit is a good way to go.
All right. Thank you. Just curious, just trying to think in the mind of a newbie, like to
Yeah.
group, because I could imagine the anxiety and the angst of not really knowing what to share, when to share, should I
Yeah.
share,
Yeah.
that stuff, or even being intimidated on the opposite side of the spectrum. Sometimes, because
Totally.
I'm admittedly a very goal oriented, task oriented guy, and I know I lean toward the tangible, and I need to slow myself down sometimes to focus on process and feelings. Like,
Right.
okay, but what do we do?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that
totally.
can sometimes be off-putting to people too. And I sense that is, if they're not ready to go there, if they don't have the clarity, they can feel overwhelmed
Yeah,
easily. If they're
for sure.
challenged.
I think
Yeah.
it is a very overwhelming experience. And I think even before the group itself, if you have any questions that you're aware of, the best would be to talk it through. What's this like? What's that like? And just to get some feedback from that leader so that you know. I've been in groups recently and find that I still have a tendency to sort of withdraw and get a little bit quiet, and that I
Mhm.
do better when I know the structure of the group, that it's easier for me then to say what's put out there, and that groups are run differently. So I'm not always sure what the expectation of groups are. And yeah, so I think it's really helpful to clarify that.
Wow. Thank you. Man, we could just keep going with the group. Um, hey, if anybody's listening to this and you want to, have a follow-up session, please let us know and I'll rope Tanya back in for some follow-up questions. Cause we could have a whole master class on groups with you, I'm sure,
Yeah.
about how to structure groups, pitfalls, strategies, break the ice methods, homework, all that stuff, right? Be
Mhm. Yeah.
so much to unpack. Because I know you're a wealth of information, and like I said, I think you're the first person I've had on the podcast to really talk about the group process. So if it's fine with you, I'd love to have you back on down the road at
Oh,
some
I love
point
it.
to do a little more deep diving about the work you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Where can our listeners learn more about you? Where can you be found?
So my website is my name, but it's also, because it's easier to remember, Group with Tanya, all one word. So Tanya is Tanya. Group with Tanya. The documentary that I mentioned is on that website, so you can just push a button to watch that. And as I also mentioned, I do the free um, discovery sessions. If somebody's interested in group, then I can talk it through with you about whatever your personal specific needs are, and to see how group could help with those particular needs. So I'd be happy to do that. And I also have a little PDF that I've added to the mix, inspired by Brene Brown. It's a
Mm.
little she does these permission slips that we
Hmm.
all kind of, I think, could benefit from giving ourselves permission for whatever it is that we're struggling with. So I just have a little PDF on there if anybody's interested, to give yourself permission for anything that you need. So
How
something
fun.
like,
Nice. A nice little gift, right?
yeah, and I heard her talking to, I think it was Oprah actually. She was saying, that Brene Brown herself said, I give myself permission to be giddy when I meet Oprah, that kind of thing, something like that.
Great,
So I thought
great.
that was cute. And she said that she stuffs them in her pockets. So yeah, so that's
Nice. I
cute.
love that. I love that. So you can be found pretty easily. I'm going to go ahead and take a little gander at your website here. So this is your website, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Very nice. Very nice. So this is the Watch Now. That's your documentary, right?
Yep, that's the documentary.
Ooh, nice and easy to find. I like that.
Yeah.
And this Discover group, that's for the Discovery call?
Yep, yep. They can schedule, people can schedule it themselves, and it's up to 45 minutes. It doesn't have to be 45 minutes, but however much time is going to be helpful for us. And
Wow,
yeah,
45 minutes?
yeah,
That's generous. Wow. I thought, everyone stuck to the 15-minute consult call thing. That's great. Wow. All right, everybody. I hope you're taking advantage of that because that's not very common. I'll tell you that. Yeah, 45 minutes. That's great. All right. Testimonials, no doubt. And yeah, very nice. And
I
you
also,
have been featured on other podcasts, I see.
yes, yeah.
Good. Good. All right.
And
Well, I
I
like how you
also,
lay out your site here. Very, very user friendly.
great. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I also have on Instagram and TikTok, and they're sort of the same videos, although Instagram is growing a little bit. Um, I'm blanking out on what I'm called. Tanya the Therapist, all one word, on either TikTok or Instagram. And Instagram, I've started to do on Tuesdays. I do Tuesdays with Tanya. It's just
Oh,
a
I see that.
live at noon Eastern time on Tuesdays. And what I've started to talk a lot about now is the idea of energetic clutter, because I realize in all the different work that I do, my focus is to help people identify like what's getting in the way, what's weighing down. We all have a certain amount of bandwidth. What's weighing you down or getting in the way so that you're not able to connect to the things that really matter most of all, and helping people to clear that energetic clutter. Group is a great way to do that, but
Wow. So I love how accessible you are. Weekly lives on Instagram. Just a side nugget. I was just listening to a podcast of social media marketing. If you ever listen the other day, apparently Instagram has in the works desktop access to lives. So that might be something you'd be into since you're doing lives anyway every week. Just keep an eye out for that.
Whoa.
Excellent. And this is your Instagram down here at the bottom, right? So guy right here. Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. All right, everybody. No excuses. Tanya's easy to find. And even a free discovery call there and a documentary. So no excuses. All right. Super. Well, I really, really appreciate having you on today. Feel free to reach out anytime if you want to jump back on, and I'll be sure to reach back to you. And yeah. Thank
you so much. It's been I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for helping to raise mental health awareness. It means the world to me and everyone listening. So it's a valiant effort. I appreciate it. Yeah. Keep up the great work. Okay.
Thank you. And thank you for, like I said earlier, but just podcasts like these, I think is healing, so healing for our world.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a podcast addict, so I'm a little biased, but it's the reason I started one. I listen to them all day anyway. It's my grounding method, as I tell my clients. There's lots of ways to ground. For me, it's having an AirPod in my ear. There's my jacked up AirPod case. And I always have an AirPod in my ear. And whether I'm doing the garden like yesterday and tackling some lantana bushes, or if I'm doing the laundry or watering the plants, I always have a podcast in my ear because it's my mantra and it keeps my head in the right space. So
yeah, same.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. You enjoy your sunny New York weather. I'll enjoy my 100-degree California weather. And maybe take my kid to the water park today. I think that's on the agenda. So, all right. Well, you take care. Enjoy your week. Okay.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have you been linked to a therapist yet? If not, be sure to check out my video tutorial on how to find a therapist at the end of this video, or if you're listening in on the podcast, be sure to look in the description below. If you're getting value from this content, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family if you haven't done so already. If there's anything you'd like me to speak to directly, please let me know using the Contact Us form in the description. Well, there you have it, another tool to help you thrive. Now go make good things happen. Bye-bye.